Hello, I am Sean Sands from gamerswithjobs.com, and I wanted to. So I've got a sort of let's play of the pre-release of Stellaris going in a separate playlist, but I wanted to take sort of a side video here to answer a question, which I think is it's pretty critical. Like it's going to be a pretty important question for a lot of people. For somebody like me, who's played a ton of EU4, who's played Europa Universalis 4, Crusader Kings 2, who has some experience playing these sort of grand paradox strategy games. Stellaris is sort of a no-brainer. It's an obvious next step for me. Of course I'm going to play it. But there's a lot of people, and I have been that person before, who haven't played these grand strategy games, who, have kind of seen them and been interested, but they seem immense and sort of intimidating. The idea of a new paradox sci-fi game is super cool, but I mean, is it approachable if you aren't sort of a paradox nerd, if you haven't played a ton of these games before? Is this the one to kind of get you into the system and get you into playing, or is it just sort of another one that's just a little bit? It's a little bit for some people sometimes too much. I don't know. And to be honest, I don't think it is too much. I don't think something like EU4 or CK2. I think it's just that there's that learning curve that these games sometimes have, where it seems like there's so much data and so much information, so many game systems and so many mechanics and so much to take in at a time, that until it just becomes familiar to you, it feels tricky. So I wanted to answer that question about Stellaris. Is Stellaris the right game if you haven't played grand strategy games before? To do that, I am going to load a different save than the one I've been playing for the Let's Play. That's a little bit further along. So I want to make that. I mean, not a ton further along. We're talking like a couple of hundred years into the game, or not a couple hundred, a couple decades into the game. But if you're trying to stay on blackout and you don't want to see anything further in the game, and there are no huge spoilers at all in what I'll be showing you, just want to, fair warning. But like, it's still pretty darn early. I'm still only 6 planets big in this game. But I wanted to show you something a little more, the game sort of in its, in its true mode, as it's kind of up to the fullness of the mechanics available. And of course, there's more as you continue, but I wanted to take a look at this and then kind of in the context of the question of, is this a game that, anyone can potentially jump into? Now, in this particular game, a little bit more developed galaxy here. This is a single player game. These are all AI controlled. So there's, I have a lot of neighbors. I'm here as the Republican commonalities. I have a vassal in my system. And it's actually one of the cool things that I really like about this game. This particular vassal is a AI player that actually began as a non-advanced race, right? It was, I ran across them in a research situation, and they were, just this sort of group near spacefaring technology on their own planet, and because I helped them, become a interstellar civilization, they become my vassal, which is cool. Which means they take control of these stars, which used to actually be within my borders here. You can see where the borders of my realm stop compared to theirs. These little hexagons show you where the stars they're attached to are in relation to empire borders, because the map is 3D. Some stars are above the plane, or they're all sort of below, I think, but at different levels. So unless you're looking straight down all the time, from this view, Hazra could be, looks like it's in my realm. If I'm looking from this view, it might look like it's in their realm. That's what this is. So I have, my empire. I have a vassal. I actually just won a war down here against the Dominion of Vatigij, and forced them to release this brand new civilization, the Republic of Mizar. I have an ally over here in the Sundrithan nation. So there's more of the game going on, and obviously I've got a decent number of worlds. Now, one of the things that's still kind of important to keep in mind is that you can really only control a certain number of worlds at a time. Once you've reached this limit, you actually create what are known as sectors. And I'll go ahead and do that here real quick. And sectors essentially allow you to identify parts of your empire that will become self-sufficient. They will sort of run themselves. So over here I have this distant colony around the star of Aculum, whereas opposed to most of my planets are over here in this area. And of course there are two that I just took from my enemy Shuktan and Vatigijan. Literally took. They're the what are they called? The Dominion of Vatigijan. They no longer can control that one. So I'm going to create a sector over here, and there's a reason I'm showing you this in the context of the question: is Stellaris a game to be played on? It's kind of hard to click. Is Stellaris a game to be played if you haven't played Paradox games before? And the reason I'm showing you this is because how do I finish and then so that's now a sector. The reason I'm showing you this is because this is, I think, is a key mechanic in keeping the game fairly manageable and relatively simple. Like the big problem I always have, even in a game like Master of Orion or Civilization, is I eventually have so many cities that I get, I don't want to try and control them all. I don't want to try and manage what they're building and what they're doing. This helps keep the game really focused, right? This limit on the number of systems you specifically can control actually does a good job and is sort of a good case example of the approach that Paradox is taking, which is keeping things within a fixed focus for you, right? The things you're interested in are probably, expanding your empire and doing the diplomacy and building stuff. And, that's all fun. But when it gets out of control, there's that point in a civilization game where you're just like, I don't want to issue worker orders anymore. I don't want to spend half my turn going like, you build a railroad here and you build this mine over here and you just, make a farm over, like that becomes half the turn. This game does a good job, it seems like, of managing and mitigating against that, because you're going to be releasing vassals and you're going to have these sectors and parts of your empire are going to sort of run themselves, and it's going to fall on you to make the big decisions, which is what a grand strategy game should be. It should be you making some big decisions about the direction of your empire and the edicts and the things that support what you're doing. And even though I'm not going to go into details about what all these numbers and information up here means. I do go into that detail in the Let's Play series I'm working on right now. But another important thing to notice is there's just, like, there's a cleanness to the interface. Like, if I handed you nothing and you had some experience playing a Master of Orion game or a Civilization game, you could probably begin to work out pretty quickly what these things are, right? This looks like money, and these look like resources, and these symbols probably, they're science-y looking. So you might figure out they're pretty quickly they're technology related. Number of planets, the number of ships you can support. All really approachable, all really understandable. And while there is that Paradox level of detail underneath that is available to you if you want it, it's not required. It's not something you have to keep checking, what's my army maintenance spend and how's it related to energy credits. No, there's a very sort of one-to-one connection between Stellaris' basic concepts of constructing items and then those items having an impact on your resource collection in both directions, right? It's really obvious where you spend money. So if you take a construction ship, for example, and let's say I want to build something down here, and the details of this aren't important right now. Let's say I want to build something down here. It's obvious, right? You spend a certain amount and it gives you an obvious thing. So you're making some big but easily understandable choices, right? Am I going to try the short-term amount of this money so I can increase the long-term amount of this money? and that's nice. I mean, ultimately, I think there's a transparency in all the Paradox games where once you eventually know where to look for that information, it's easily accessible. But I think that's the problem. It doesn't always feel like at your fingertips. It always feels like, it doesn't always feel like. But when I think of a game like Hearts of Iron 3, I know all this information that I want is in there somewhere. It's just a matter of parsing it out. Their ability to present a really clean, really easy to understand interface has improved dramatically, right? If you want to figure out what your planet is like, you click things that make sense, and then you have these big tabs. You can actually, if you have played a game, again, like Master of Orion or Civilization, this idea of moving populations around to connect up to specific resources and then building buildings to support those resources is fundamentally just part of the strategy gaming lexicon. One of the things I also really like, even in these big, important, critical screens, like your entire Empire screen, in EU4, again, EU4 is my favorite game of all time, but you pull up EU4 in your Empire screen, you have like 10 different pages you can go to, and each of those pages has a bunch of different things, and it's not obvious how they connect to one another. I click my Empire screen, and I have seen this kind of screen before. Like it makes a natural degree of sense. I can kind of keep track of my leaders. Buttons are where you would expect them to be. Factions are, help you understand the kind of makeup of your population. But I just want to go look at my planets. Like, what is my highest mineral producing planet? Oh, it's right here. It's Razzle, which I can go straight to. I can just click it and then figure out, if I want to build new stuff there or whatever. Right? Things take you to logical places. The ship designer, super easy to use, really, really straightforward, and fun. That's a key part of it. Technology. It's pretty evident that, if I have a research that I want to do, it's going to be in here, and I can, when like a research finishes up, you'll come to this screen and it'll say, which of these 4 things do you want to research now? And you pick it, shows you the things you get from it, for example, warp drive or cool new armor, and you can get that detail if you want to access it, but it's supplementary. It's not telling you have to go look at all the detail to make any decisions. It's saying, here's the big decision to make. How do you want to make it? We won a war, by the way. Yay! Good job. Right? And these things pop up. I love this edition. Obviously something similar they had in Europa Universalis 4, but just it continues to get cleaner. When decisions need to be made, the game does a great job of telling you, hey, go make this decision, right? So this thing pops up and it says, we have an unemployment. And you click that and you see we have just this super dense world where one person is unemployed. And then, this is actually the planet I just took over, so I haven't really gone in here yet. But you can get quick information, like it says this is a thing you need to take care of, or over here you have an inactive building, or a fleet's been detected, and it will warp you right, kind of make you aware of where that situation is. Which I think is the important part. I think that's the important part to the question of whether this is approachable, because this is still a dense game with a lot of things happening in it at once, particularly as you reach the mid to late game, where this galaxy is going to be full of a dozen or more different allies and potential enemies, and other species that you just have nothing not connected with. Right, getting that information to you in a way that makes sense is great. The outliner is very helpful. It allows you sort of quick access to everything, and you can double click on things and go straight to where they're at. This here's another thing that I really like. The game is good about alerting you to things you should be paying attention to. Both here, and if I select science ship
complete
here, this is great. So it'll be contextually relevant. So if I have my science ship selected, I want to know what the sciencey stuff I can do is. And it's, well, here's some sciencey stuff, as opposed to if I have my army selected, like they're not going to tell me about the sciencey stuff here. Armies don't do sciencey stuff. So they've just gotten better and better at this. I honestly think this game is their most 4X game around. Which is not to say that doesn't exist in some of the other grand strategy games, you know, the Crusader Kings and the UU4s and the Hearts of Irons of the world, but that they've clearly taken their ethos for the design philosophies from a familiar place, right? It isn't mimicking by any means a, you know, endless space or a Master of Orion or a Civilization, but it's clearly taking some ideas from them. And the nice thing is, so I'm showing you here, you know, a game this farther along, and this is a lot of data, and, you know, even with it presented the way it is, it can seem a little impenetrable. But if we go to a different game, if we go to a game we've just started, like the one we're working on in the Let's Play, this is the other great thing about the game. The game starts off with everybody sort of in a similar space. So you start the game in a very manageable way, right? You don't have all those numbers. I've already expanded in this game. All those numbers, you know, they make sense. You learn about them as they're sort of presented to you throughout the playthrough. So, you know, here I don't have allies, and I don't have, you know, sectors, and I don't have, you know, armies all over the place and vassals and stuff like that. Those things come at a reasonable pace. That sort of ramp of game complexity is much more even. Where in something like EU4, you know, because it is mapped to history, if you start as France, France has already been around for, you know, hundreds of years and has this complicated government system. It has all these armies, and it has vassals, and it has, you know, alliances and enemies, and maybe it's at war. You start the game and you have 19 different things already happening. You're picking the game up in the midst of history. Stellaris isn't like that. Literally, you are sort of in a position where everybody's starting from the same place. It is in that same Master of Orion idea. There's the conceit that everybody sort of gets warp technology around the same time and around the same technology level, so that you aren't in a position where you're having to make monumental decisions that aren't based on things you've already done, which is, I think, the struggle with something like a Crusader Kings or a Europa Universalis 4, where once you understand the decision-making process behind the decisions you need to make, you can get into a place where you're comfortable with the game. But at first time pressing the play button on a country like the, you know, the Holy Roman Empire, and it's like, here's 19 things that you have to be thinking about immediately. Like, how are you going to spend your monarch points, and who are you going to ally, and who are you going to rival, and who are you this? You know, there's just that density information, which is the biggest difference here. You know, the density of information ramp up is so much smoother, so much cleaner here for Stellaris. So this isn't really a video for doing a playthrough. Like I say, I've got another series I'm working on for that. But I did want to address the big question I think some people will have, which is, if I haven't played grand strategy games before, or if I've been scared off by them, should I pick up Stellaris? Is this the game that will make grand strategy accessible? And keeping in mind that I've got 20 something hours in, and the game doesn't actually release until, you know, next Tuesday, so no final decisions at all at this point, I would say strongly that every indication are that this is going to be a different and more approachable and manageable experience for players who have not played a lot of Paradox games in the past. If I had never played a Paradox grand strategy game and Stellaris had been an option, this is the game I would have started with. Because the other side of it is, all these concepts actually exist in the other games we're talking about. They actually, you'll see the parallels between these and sort of what previously Paradox had done that led to these ideas. They're just presented in a much more natural way. They're coalesced into something really manageable. And in fact, you may find you play Stellaris and all of a sudden you feel like you now know how you can go play Europa Universalis 4. Or by the time it comes out someday, maybe EU5. Or Hearts of Iron, the new Hearts of Iron game, which comes out later this year, Hearts of Iron 4. maybe this is what finally kind of gets you over that threshold of, feeling intimidated about the games. Because I have felt that 100%. I still think Hearts of Iron 3 is someday just going to hop out of my Steam library, take my lunch money, and beat me up. That game still just terrifies me. Anyway, hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into how Stellaris fits into, the big grand strategy realm and the strategy, and compares itself to other 4X games. I'm having an amazing time playing this game. I'll be probably doing a more sort of thorough review and overview of the game as a whole after it releases. But for now, my name is Sean Sands from gamerswithjobs.com. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you're interested, because I think there's a lot to love about Stellaris. Anyway, until next time, we will see you real soon.